You don't you don't first think of the story of the song and then make the song. It has to come out of that moment. And that's like what film has. It's just that moment which is holy. And like this moment, it's holy. But like we walk around like it's not holy. We walk around like there are some holy moments and there are all the other moments that are not holy, right?
Right.
But like this moment's holy, right? And I feel like film can let us see that. Can like frame it so that we see like this moment, holy, and it's like holy, 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 moment by moment. But like who can live that way? Who can like go wow, holy.
Texting.
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 Texting. Texting. Texting. Texting.
Texting.
Texting.
Mark, Will, and Tomek present
Texting.
And welcome to episode 2 of Texting. This is Tomek in Moscow.
And I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
So we're going a different direction in this pod. Rather than discussing a piece of literature, we'll be discussing an excerpt from the Richard Linklater film Waking Life. We're going to be talking about a scene which has been nicknamed The Holy Moment, and it features a conversation with a filmmaker named Kaveh. I can't even remember his surname right now.
Zahedi.
There we go. Okay. And I chose this particular text this week because, well, Waking Life is my favorite movie, and this scene is the one that resonates with me the most, so I wanted to talk about it. So, Mark, do you want to summarize maybe what happens in this scene, and then I can maybe start asking some questions that help us go a little bit deeper with it?
Well, as you say, the filmmaker Kaveh Zahedi is having a conversation with, I discovered as I looked into it, a poet named David Jewell. But Kaveh is the focus. He does most of the talking. And he's discussing the film theories of André Bazin.
Bazin.
Okay,
fine.
Bazin. André Bazin. Bazin.
Or Bazin.
Yeah.
Bazin.
And Bazin is a film critic associated with the Cahiers du Cinéma, the famous French film journal that was associated with the French New Wave. And I guess one of the important ideas that Kaveh focuses on as he's discussing the theories of Bazin is this reproduction of reality. Film, unlike other genres, is a direct reproduction of reality.
Can be, right?
Can be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay.
I mean, basically, I was going to say...
Sure.
after telling you can take it from there, I'm going to interrupt. But to me, it sounds like Bazin is advocating a kind of cinéma vérité, like a real cinema, a realistic or neo-realistic brand of cinema, almost documentary style. I mean, I know he also was a fan of the Italian neo-realists, but as I understand it, his ideal kind of cinema is a kind of cinema verite. It's a almost documentary style. You just let the camera reproduce reality.
Great. I think that's a really good summation. So now I feel like I need to pull back a little bit, even though I did suggest that we just go very microscopic with this particular scene. But now in my explanation of why I've chosen this scene, I probably do need to give a little bit of backstory. And so I'm a big Richard Linklater fan, and I guess one way we could characterize Linklater's films is that they often aren't particularly plot heavy, but rather they focus on conversations between characters, and so the dialogue is very important. There's a lot of kind of space to breathe, and I always just got an incredible high from his movies, and maybe not even exclusive to Linklater, but just films that were very dialogue heavy and that didn't really require much plot. And even if I think about literature, if I say that Catcher in the Rye is one of my favorite books, the stereotype about Catcher in the Rye is that it's a story or it's a novel where nothing really happens, but there's this intense focus on dialogue, and you get to know the character really intimately, and it's like you're making a friend. And so I think Linklater has always had that aspect, and I would say this particular scene from his film, in a way you could say he's like speaking through Cave, maybe, and Linklater saying, this is what I'm doing, and this is why, and this is what attracts him to this style of filmmaking. You have any response to any of that?
Well, again, as I was doing my research on Bazin, apparently he promoted this idea of personalism. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of one of Kaveh Zahedi's comments in this scene, The Holy Moment, when he's talking about the Hollywood star system, how in a way that's a good thing in terms of Bazin's ideas, because you're focusing on the person that's playing the role. You're more focused on the person, that's the personalism, I guess, than the plot or the narrative.
And I liked that a lot.
Certainly,
Go on.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, if you look at other Linklater films, you can certainly see the influence there. I mean, the Before trilogy and Boyhood, where the actors, I mean, it seems like a lot of it is improvisational. It's just like they become those characters, and then the camera is just recording those characters interacting.
Mm-hmm. What's that idea of like breaking the third wall, or what's that whole...
The fourth wall.
Yeah, what is that? Can you remind me? I don't know if it pertains to this, but I want to see if it does.
Well, I mean, that's from the theater, right? Like, if you're the audience, you're watching something on the stage. There are three walls. There's the back. There are two sides, and then the fourth wall is between the audience and the performers on the stage, right? That's the fourth wall.
Okay.
So if you break that fourth wall, then audience and performers interact directly.
Okay, so I think that's actually really relevant. So yeah, I think that's what I'm always thirsty for as a reader or as a viewer, is I'm trying to like break through the artifice and just hear somebody's reality. And I know you could just say, well, just watch documentaries then. And yeah, I guess I could, but I don't even think maybe that line is that important between what is documentary and what isn't. But I think that's really attractive to me. And I guess the point being that reality sometimes is just more thrilling and more exciting than a story. And I know you can say a story is often just our experiences anyway. So again, all these lines are blurry and gray, so I don't want to define anything or limit it too much. But yeah.
Well, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, okay, then what's the difference between a Linklater film and some bullshit reality TV?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that it would be the content.
Okay.
Or the
or
types
the
of people that he's attracted to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So let's maybe we can probe just some of the individual lines within this scene. And so one of the first lines, cinema in its essence is an introduction to reality. And you already said that earlier, but yeah, reality is actually reproduced. So
a reproduction of reality, right?
Yeah, actually. Well, yeah. So first he says is an introduction to reality, and then he says reality is actually reproduced.
Oh, okay. I thought he was saying reproduction of reality.
Well, the script I have may be wrong, but yeah, because
I was looking at one.
But introduction goes with two better, right? I mean, it's a better fit, just grammatically.
Yeah, I thought it said reproduction of reality, but I don't know. I was looking at a version with Portuguese subtitles, and
okay.
I think that's how it was translated. But
yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
Carry on.
So, what do we make of that? Do we think that cinema is an accurate representation? Like, to what extent can cinema be a reproduction of reality or a representation of reality?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how are we posing this question? Are we asking what Bazin would think? Because I think he would argue that it is. It's the purest aesthetic or artistic reproduction of reality, much more accurate than, say, painting. Mm-hmm. But there's not universal consensus on this. I mean, I just finished reading Thomas Bernhardt's Extinction, and he rants, or one of his characters rants against photography throughout the novel. He says the process of stultification began over 100 years ago with photography, and that process of stultification was accelerated when pictures began to move.
So sorry, but for ignorant people like me and possibly some of our audience, what is stultification?
Like stupefaction.
It's like stupefaction.
Yeah, well, yeah. So people are becoming more and more brain dead, according to this character, because of the misrepresentation or the falsified reproduction of reality represented by photography. And then it got even worse when photographs or pictures began to move and we had film. So I think this character in the Bernhardt novel would very much disagree with Bazin.
Okay. So what? Because of the selective nature of film, in a way, in like the artifice aspect.
Well, I think he would just argue that it's not actually an accurate reproduction. It's always a falsification.
Right, but because of that intention, because of the the ability of a director to manipulate what we see.
I think it's that, but this character also talks about how people present false versions of themselves when they know they're being photographed, when they know they're being watched, and like this image, this photographic image of a person, or this filmed version of a person is not realistic at all. That's not who they really are. And they're even less real than they would be if you tried to draw them or paint them, maybe, or describe them with words. I think that's probably what this character would argue.
Okay, I mean, I don't know how much that connects with me, because I feel like, especially if we're talking about specific things that you've been thinking about, for example, like if we talk about the movie Waking Life, and it's a series of conversations maybe around just topics that are interesting for people or prescient, whether a film is rolling or not, as long as you get the characters to talk about things that are genuinely important to them, it's almost like the topic could overcome the whatever fakeness they're performing with, if that makes any sense. Like, if you ask people to be honest about what's going on and what they're thinking about, you're going to get something a bit closer to what their reality is, right?
Well, certainly you could. Certainly you could. I'm just thinking about my own former prejudice against the genre of film cinema. Like, I've overcome that prejudice, and I there are many films that I love, but I remember, and I think it relates to this issue of narrative that Kaveh raises in this brief scene. But I remember, and probably it was a prejudice against films which were more narrative in nature, because I remember thinking, like, I'd rather just read, like I'd rather read a book than watch a movie version of that book. But then I discovered that there are great filmmakers who do something that literature cannot do. So they do something with the genre of film that is almost impossible with words in literature. Maybe there's some exceptions, but I'm thinking of directors like David Lynch and Fellini, to some extent Bergman, Kurosawa. Like, when I discovered their films, I saw that, okay, you can do something with film that you can't do with any other genre, even painting, maybe. Although I think painting is a genre which is more similar to filmmaking than perhaps literature is.
In terms of like the mise en scène, maybe, right?
Well, I know that Kurosawa, for example, used to paint every scene before he shot it. So he very much had a painter's perspective when he was filming. The emphasis is on the visual rather than the narrative and the verbal. Right.
And I think that's something I was going to bring up later, because in this short scene we also get this reference to Truffaut, who apparently said that the best scripts don't make the best films. And I think what you're saying right now is like very much echoing that, that for a film to really be successful, it needs to do more than just perform a script, but it has to.
Well, yeah. I mean, think of a David Lynch film. If you just read it on the page, it's not going to be nearly as powerful as it is when you see what he's filmed. And actually, he and Fellini both, they were very loose with their scripts, right? Like they allowed for chance discoveries. Like, things would happen on set and they would incorporate them into the film narrative. It would become part of the narrative, but that you had to allow that chance occurrence to take place. You have to be open enough to allow that to happen.
Absolutely.
And if you're overly reliant, well, I'm just saying, if you're overly reliant on the script, then that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought of like one quick example. I don't know if you're a fan of either Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Both.
Yeah,
I was actually thinking about Curb Your Enthusiasm.
But it's like
totally
Exactly. It's like the evolution, right? Seinfeld would have a much tighter script, and Curb is allowing a lot more improv and just kind of maybe even dead moments, but moments where characters can just kind of be. And I think that's the reason that Curb is a superior show, because it's less neat, and you get more of the rawness, and that's more exciting. It's more exciting. It's more dangerous.
Well, yeah, and Larry David allows all the actors to improvise. I know I've seen interviews and so forth, and I know that he and his writers, I don't know if he's working with a team of writers, I assume he is, but
yeah,
they develop a scenario. It's like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And he might have a line or two. Like I remember in one of the early seasons, he had he wanted Susie to call Jeff, her husband, right, a fat fuck. So that was like the instruction, right? Like, okay, this is more or less what's going to happen, but make sure you call him a fat fuck.
Right.
And so like they just work around that, like that's the blueprint. It's here it is. These are the things that are going to happen, and at some point, make sure you call him a fat fuck because that'll be funny. And they did it, and they probably do, I don't know, 3 or 4 takes, and they just picked the one with the best energy.
And that's another interesting show in terms of, again, this like is what draws us to the show. Maybe it's the fact that we think this is who they really are. Again, so right, it's like we're not following necessarily a storyline. We're getting again excited because maybe this really is Larry David, and the stuff that's portrayed is so similar to what we imagine their life would be like. The life that the setting, the kind of places that they go, right? It's all like it's a reality show, right? But again, coming back to it's reality show with people that we're interested in, rather than like maybe some of the shit that we're fed on like maybe more lowbrow reality show.
Well, I don't know. I still see them as characters,
They are, but I think maybe I think what appeals to us in a way is that, well, they pretend not to be characters anyway, right? It's like what we're meant to believe is that this is actually Larry David. I mean, he uses his own name, right?
Right.
Okay, can I shift the conversation to a different topic?
Yeah.
So this is another aspect of the scene that I think is important for me, and so it's the idea of holy. And I know neither of us are probably religious in any traditional sense, but I think that this idea of like film being a record of God is interesting. And as a Ginsbergian, he has this poem "Holy," which is a poem that always attracted me, and he's just basically saying holy this, holy that, holy everything. And I don't know, I was going through
asshole.
Yeah, holy asshole. And I was going through some like mental health shit last week, feeling a little better now, but as I was in one of my lows, I was just trying to put the word holy like before what I was experiencing, like holy obsessions, holy intrusive thoughts, whatever they may be. And I think that I like, first of all, that's just maybe an aside, but I like I always am attracted to that general like attempt to see the sacred in what we're experiencing and not just treat it like so to celebrate life and to cherish life, even if it's not enjoyable, even if it's not making us happy, but still to kind of try as much as we can to to carpe diem it and to feel the miracle of it. So do you want to respond to any of that?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I actually think this is far more important than the film theories of Bazin.
Okay.
This notion of the holy. Okay, so this reminded me of a lot of things. First of all, Cave points out that actually this holiness is taking place all the time. But if we noticed it, we wouldn't be able to function, right? Like everything is holy, every moment is holy, but we can't function in our lives if we're aware of that 100% of the time,
or
and
if we're calling attention to it, right?
Well, yeah. So this reminded me of Aldous Huxley's idea of the human mind in The Doors of Perception. He says his theory is that actually the human brain is a kind of filter, which, of course, is cleansed in the sense that Blake recommended, right? Like if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it really is, that is infinite.
Yeah.
And but we can't function that way, right? So the human mind, as humans evolved, became a sort of filtering device to prevent this ever-present realization that we're always experiencing the infinite. Like how could we survive? Like if we're just constantly aware of that, it makes our existence more difficult. And then of course in Huxley's theory, it's psychedelics that allow us to be aware of that for a brief period.
And for sure they are. I mean, they're super helpful with that.
Yeah. And I actually read that the filmmaker Kaveh Zahedi has filmed himself on mushrooms with various people, and so he's certainly aware of that. I mean, actually, this conversation in the holy moment looks like I wouldn't be surprised if they were both tripping while they're having this conversation, you know?
Maybe. I mean, the other guy is significantly more mellow, right? But yeah, and especially with the way the artist is playing with it, right? All the like kind of fireworks popping around Kaveh's head and stuff like that.
And then when it cuts back to the voyeur in the theater, like the seats are not floating, but they're like waves. You know,
I mean, the whole
like
movie
waving.
is like waving, to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Since we're focusing on this particular scene, but it reminded me of that idea. And so what is it that makes one moment, this moment, a holy moment or the holy moment, in contradistinction to all the other holy moments? And in this clip, it's the frame. You can actually see him make the frame with his fingers, right? Like a couple of times, and those sparks fly off. It is the frame that makes it holy. So you want to have a holy moment, turn on the camera, and it becomes the holy moment. It is the frame.
Right.
And this reminded me of two things. Number one, it's a Dada idea. Think of Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, right? Like he just signed a urinal and said, "Here it is. This is a work called Fountain." And of course, everyone said, "No, it's a urinal. That's not art." He said, "Yes, it is, because I say it's art." In other words, he put a frame around it, put it in a museum. That's what makes it art. That's what gives it its sanctity, right?
But is it I wonder if it's the effort that goes into it. Like, sorry to interrupt you, but like, for example, I don't write as much as you do, especially these days. But one of the main motivations to write is because I feel like the act of writing, you're then suddenly consecrating things. And so it's like when I was in Egypt this summer, so it's like I have my daily experience, which in a normal situation I would have the day and then I would go to sleep, and it would be like a day. Whatever kind of day it was just a day. But then if at the end of the day I write about it, whether it was a shit day or not, suddenly that day assumes this like holy quality in my writing. So like the writing also is the frame, right? It's like,
yes, of course.
Right. But I mean, I get frustrated sometimes because I remember this girl in Korea who was like one of my first girlfriends there, and I was like obsessed with creating stuff at the time, and like in whatever medium, whether it was like making a collage on the wall or writing, and and she wasn't, and I would kind of like push her to, but she would respond like, well, my life is my art. And like, so it's funny because like that's kind of like how I console myself now with the fact that I'm not creating much. It's like, yeah, but I don't need to, like, just my living style or is my art. But I think that sometimes without a formal medium, it's hard to maybe convince myself of that in the same way, you know, if I haven't done if I don't have anything to actually show for it.
Well, everyone's different. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
You know, at different periods of our lives, we have different needs for that. And you know, sometimes it's just not possible to do what we think we might want to do. I remember I was working at this horrible place for a year, and every day I came home exhausted, and that whole year I could not write anything. I couldn't write any kind of poetry. I couldn't write stories. I just didn't have the energy for that. But suddenly I started making collages. Like that year, I made many collages, and I'd never done that before. And I don't know what it was that encouraged or inspired me to do it. But that's how I ended up expressing myself. That was the frame in which I deposited whatever, you know, psychological or spiritual issues I was processing. And so, you know, that's just what happened during that year. And then I left that particular workplace, and then I started to develop a different routine. Yeah, I have a certain routine now, but that could change later.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I would just say that the people who depress me the most, I mean, now I'm starting to sound like a little bit like a beatnik cliche because I'm thinking of like the Kerouac quote where he's like, oh, the people I like are the mad ones. But the people that do feel like that depress me are the ones who seem really detached from like any aspect of the holy, or I just have difficulty when, like, I don't know, I came to work a couple days ago and met a couple of colleagues, and it's just the whole conversation, nothing is about joy, nothing is about like, what are you doing this weekend? It's all just about like money, future, and it's like, it just seems like all the holiness of being alive right now is just so far away, you know. So I don't know what that says, except that I'm desperate to keep the holy in my life. Yeah.
Well, it's always there. I mean, I was also reminded of Joseph Campbell's comment about something he observed when he was in India. So he saw this ritual wherein any random object was circled. Like, you just draw a circle around any random object, and it becomes an object of contemplation. Just by being in that magic circle that's drawn around the object, no matter what it is, it becomes the focus. And so you see the holiness of that random object just because, well, basically it was put in a frame, you know, even though you just draw a circle around it. And so, like, I don't know if it was some guru that was teaching students, and it was some sort of exercise that he recommended, or it was just something that the teacher or saint or whatever told Joseph Campbell privately. But you just meditate on that object, and you see the holiness inherent in that object. It's a manifestation of the divine, right? Just because it's in the world. But simply the act of circling it, putting a frame around it, that's what makes it holy. this conversation that we witnessed, maybe we would just overhear it in a cafe and ignore it. But because Linklater put a frame around it and put it on a screen for us to view, we see the holiness of it. I mean, and it's always there, but we usually don't notice it, and for good reason, because if we were constantly aware of this and we didn't filter any of that holiness out, it would be too overwhelming. It would be like sensory overload.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I was thinking about that when you mentioned it earlier, and maybe to some degree, but I still think, for example, what can be a good definer for me between someone who has the potential to be like a good friend and someone who's just going to kind of remain a colleague, for example, is like how free can we be with the idea that life is holy, how free, I don't know, how just how open we can be, I guess, to talk about different things and to kind of have, if we say that everything is holy, I mean, can you make a random comment with a person, like, without them getting spooked, without them kind of breaking?
Oh, probably not.
Yeah, I'm saying, but the people that you can do it with, those are the relationships where you can openly discuss the fact that maybe life is holy. I'm saying that once you get to that point in a relationship, whether it's the first day or after a year, whatever, but that's a big difference, and I think that's what I've lost in a way with my like traveling life, is because it's like I have to you find those people and then you have to kind of refine them, or I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of like too tangential, but yeah.
Well, I mean, in my experience, most people will disappoint you, and the people that you have close connections with, you should cherish those people and try to maintain close contact with them.
Yep, for sure.
But also, also there's this issue of layers, which is mentioned. The conscious mind, that filtering aspect intrudes on that experience of the holy, just as it does with everything else, right? Like the interlocutor, David Jewell, this poet that's talking to Cave, he's saying, as I'm basically saying that as he's experiencing the holy moment, he's thinking about how he's experiencing the holy moment. Right. So that consciousness sort of intrudes, and you could say in a way it spoils it, but maybe not. I mean, it's like when you're meditating and you're supposed to just be focused on the breath, if you do a certain kind of breathing exercise, and then your mind wanders. So
for sure, I mean, it could happen in sex.
The discipline, well, yeah.
You can be in and out of like the experience, right?
Another form of meditation, but yeah, but I'm thinking of like a breathing exercise, like the monkey mind is activated and you start thinking about all kinds of crazy shit. You just calmly push it away and go back to focusing on the breath, Right. So I think it's inevitable that the filter is going to intrude, but just depends on. I think if you're consciously aware of it and able to shut it off from time to time, then it's probably pretty comfortable.
Without sounding too like grandpa-ish, how much do you think like technology is? I mean, you mentioned earlier how, I can't remember who you were citing, but someone had said that photography and film had like taken
Bernhard.
away. Yeah, had taken us from reality. Do you think that technology is exacerbating that issue, or is that just so subjective to different people?
Well,
I just don't see many people. I don't know. I see a lot. If I think about my students, for example, and I just spent a weekend with 11 and 12-year-olds, and it just does seem like such a barrier for their own relationships and for the relationships of the
Because
environment around them, because they're just on their screens.
Because they're always on their phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just take a ride on the subway and look around. If you're not scrolling through your own phone, just take a moment to observe the others. Like, everyone's got their head down. They're looking at they're looking at TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I mean, I do think that.
But is that reality though? Is my point, because I don't like falling into any of the cliches. I don't like to like get romantic about the past, like overly romantic, or romanticize life without technology too much, especially if it's not justified. So I'm saying, like, why isn't reality what's going on your screen too? Like, how is that not reality? But if you're gaming, if you're playing some bullshit game, why is that? I'm just trying to say, like, what is, you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, it's not my thing, but
it's not mine either. But
others want to do it and say that's their reality, who am I to disagree or disapprove? That's their business. I mean,
But is there something objective we can say more than that? Like, do you think that there's a possibility to say, no, actually you have lost reality?
Well,
or
I think certainly social media can be toxic, and studies have been done proving that, young people suffer depression and other ill effects from excessive screen time. I mean, like
but toxic is not necessarily not reality, right?
No, but okay.
That's just a darker reality.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Yeah, well.
But I'm interested in this
sure.
like filter between like us and reality. So I'm saying,
no, it could very. I mean, yeah, it could be reality, but I'm just saying that, like, all the Facebook executives, they strictly limit the amount of screen time that their kids have, because they're very well aware of the harmful effects of their own product.
Sure. On that aspect, 100% agree. Like, I definitely think it's destructive in terms of happiness, but I guess my question is more about, like, reality, right? Like,
well, I can't say
looking
it's
at
not
person
real
in their three-dimensional form, is that more real than looking at them on? But I think it's an interesting question, right?
Well, but is alcoholism real? Is drug addiction? Is sex addiction, or depression, or any number of some sort of
right
fatal disease? That's a reality too, but maybe it's not the most preferable reality. But it exists. We can't deny its existence. We can't say it's not some part of reality.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, my question is, like, are these all just different experiences of reality, or is one reality like more real than another reality? Like, is there an actual? Yeah, I think that's an interesting question for me about, like, the role of the screen in some way, for example.
Yeah, I don't obsess about that too much. I just think it is what it is, Yeah. And each individual determines for him or herself what role it will play.
I want to say that, but at the same time, like, society has made it compulsory, basically, to be very, very connected if you're going to take a mainstream job, for example. Like, so you're taking on this experience.
You can limit it
to some extent, but only.
I was not on social media at all until I started publishing books and music, and then just for promotional purposes, I got on all the platforms I was supposed to be on, just so I could share my creations with the world. But there was definitely a change. I mean, I definitely noticed that things were different for me
in terms of your consciousness.
Yeah,
for sure.
It has an effect. And so you really, and I even felt that there was like a somatic reaction, like when I at one point, and even now sometimes, like when I go to check Facebook or whatever, I actually feel nauseous. Like I'm just like entering this cesspool, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you have to limit it. Like, you don't want to just become I don't, at least. I don't want to become a zombie just scrolling through screens endlessly. But, you know, I check messages, respond to those I need to respond to, and then try to get off. But, you know, that sometimes, like,
I'm more doomsday about all this stuff. I do feel that we've lost something, and it's like irretrievable. I mean, that's just an emotional experience. I'm not saying it's like, but that's just my.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think you're probably right. I mean, we're definitely doomed, but in more ways than one. But yeah, it's I don't remember how I wanted to conclude this part, but there was definitely a change when I became more active on social media. And I'm still not active, you know, like I don't like to post pictures of myself and show everybody what I ate for dinner and you know, announce every trivial event in my life. I just use it for promotional purposes. Oh, but I know what I was going to say. But I've learned a lot. Like, sometimes other people post something, right? Like, oh, listen to this music I discovered, or here's a book I read. So I learn a lot that way. Or they share art. Also, yeah, often it's like articles. Someone shares an article, and oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah, I don't think that it necessarily deadens our intellect. I think for me, it's just more of a kind of like creating like a nonstop kind of chaos in the brain on like levels that I think people could experience like one emotion for longer and more profoundly in the past in many different ways, whether it's like even if it's depression or melancholy. But I think that it would have like an intensity that now it's hard to even achieve this level of intensity for different experiences because it's just constantly being interrupted by phone life. Well, that's just my experience, though. All right, can I just like?
Have you ever just?
Oh, no, it's fine.
Tangential, but have you ever like monitored your phone use time? Like, you can see how many hours per day you're on your phone. It's probably
I know
too
you
many.
can, but yeah,
I know it is for me.
I mean, it's just my existence is through the phone. I mean, it's in some reality, but again, even just saying that, there's so many ways. Like how am I experiencing my phone? Is it just having a podcast on? Is it, you know, there's so many ways to discipline yourself because it's an everything device, right? So it's your television, it's your radio. So for me, it's like trying to like make my experience on my phone like more, like increase the quality, basically, like increase the quality of the content that I'm clicking on, stuff like that, you know. But it's still almost inevitably that almost every minute, especially now, like when Liliana's gone for a couple of weeks, it's like every minute I'm doing something with the phone, you know. Like
it's compulsive. You can't put it down.
Yeah,
it's addictive. I mean, it's addictive. It is a kind of drug.
So
and it's been recognized as such, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And I'm sure we can focus on just that, but I feel like maybe we should bring it back a little bit to the text. It's like,
how about the mosquito?
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about just the visceral aesthetic of the scene a little bit. Yeah, so go ahead with. I mean, we could. Do you want to talk about the mosquito then?
That's an interesting interruption, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's something that had to have been unplanned, right? It just happened. That spontaneity is probably. I'm imagining that you like that aspect of it, right?
I didn't give it too much thought, but now when you talk about it, like now it seems like very appropriate, right? Because it's again giving that aspect of reality and not scriptedness. So it's almost like perfect for what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like I always enjoyed Kaveh He seems kind of effeminate, and I don't know. I liked his voice. I like his general nature. I watched this movie when I was 18 in Tucson, Arizona, and I don't know. I liked this representation of maleness at that time. I think I think I was attracted to this like representation of like I don't know. I liked him. He was charismatic and I thought he was an impressive person. And did you have any like more visceral reactions to his presence? Did you like him?
Well, I found him entertaining, and I looked at some trailers from other works of his. I think his film "I Am a Sex Addict" would be interesting to watch, and I was thinking about how it's unlikely. I think it's from 2009. I'm just, or no, 2005. It's been a while, but I was just thinking like he could probably never make that today, or maybe he could, but he would be vilified.
Possibly,
I imagine.
It's hard for me to know because I know that like probably in like the mainstream, yes, but it's hard. I guess. Well, a fringe always does exist, right?
Yeah, he could. Of course, he could make it, but he would. I think the reaction would be different than it was at that time. I think it was well reviewed, and he was praised for his brave exploration of this taboo topic. But now it's likely that he would be attacked and canceled. But I saw a short. Well, I saw a short of his called "Bob Dylan Hates Me," and I thought that was quite entertaining. And interestingly, it was animated too, like Waking Life.
I wanted to also, like, if anyone's interested who's listening in exploring his work, I also wanted to plug this program he did called The Show About the Show. I realized today as I was researching that I have already seen a lot of it, and it was fascinating. And my buddy Joe, who's a filmmaker, was the one who recommended it to me. And it's just funny because I put all these things together today. Like, I didn't realize that was him. Like, I never realized that. Yeah, so that was weird because I'd already watched his show without realizing that was the same guy from Waking Life. But anyway, that's like,
you can't get more meta than
exactly
that. The show about the show.
Exactly,
yeah,
and
that too.
Apparently, like, the most compelling thing about the show is that you watch this guy basically like fuck up his life. I don't know. Maybe that, I don't know. But like, I think he genuinely does fuck up his life, like, in the show.
Sounds a bit like Curb Your Enthusiasm.
But even more intense because like he's filming himself actually, like he actually is having a breakdown and he's like filming himself do it and he's like making entertainment from that.
Yeah.
I mean, Larry David like is meant to be actually kind of I think he's disassociated himself from that character to a fair degree.
It's more of a character.
Yeah.
But I would argue that, I mean, I haven't even seen it, but I'm guessing that Zahedi is probably playing himself as a character, you know. Whether maybe it's not even conscious. Maybe he doesn't even realize it.
And when you get so deeply into something, you don't even really have the opportunity maybe to be something other than the thing you're recording. I don't know. This is maybe not as interesting either, but I just was watching this documentary about Jim Carrey portraying Andy Kaufman. Did you see Man on the Moon?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, basically, he gets so into the character of Andy Kaufman that, you know, he plays Andy Kaufman constantly, whether it's during a scene or not, you know, and just, again, that line between, like, reality and the character is just getting so insanely blurred to the point where he's, like, getting people to fight him because he's being so irritating as the character, you know?
Right.
I don't know, so... Anyway, should we wrap it up? Any final thoughts?
Well, there was one other... Actually, there are a couple of things.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's up to you. Like, I think the it's important to comment on the rotoscope that is used, since that's such a unique effect, right? And then Linklater used it again in A Scanner Darkly.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think he repeated himself like that?
So first of all, I'm not
have
familiar.
you seen that?
I get what you probably mean by that, but I don't know what. Can you define that term for me, please? Rotoscope.
Well, that's the animation effect,
okay.
right?
Animation
Have you
effect
seen-
that animators use to trace over motion picture footage.
Yeah. Have you seen A Scanner Darkly?
No, but I am aware of it.
Okay. So, it was a few years later. I don't know exactly how many.
2006 is
Okay.
Scanner Darkly.
And Waking Life was what, 2001?
Must be something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so 5 years later, he makes another film using that same technique. Which, okay, he's entitled to do that, but I mean, it's interesting for me because I've actually seen A Scanner Darkly in its entirety, and I've not seen Waking Life in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
Just the holy moment scene, and then various others that I watched.
Definitely you
to
should
prepare
please.
for this discussion. Well, I'd like to. I just wasn't able to find it
For sure.
on a streaming platform here, and of course, Netflix doesn't have it because Netflix doesn't have anything that people
It's
want
true.
to watch.
It's frustrating. And it's frustrating because it's like the only thing, or one of the only things I have a subscription to, so it's like easy for me, but it's not that much more effort to download a film. Like I can do it, but it's like, not as
Yeah.
like. But I was gonna say what makes I think Waking Life exceptional is that it has a team of like something like 40 different artists. Whereas so when you go from one scene to another, it's a completely different visual experience,
Right.
and that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the importance of dreams is, I mean, I'm actually researching dreams and the dream process now as I prepare for a novel that is, I don't know, 2 or 3 books down the queue.
Mm-hmm.
But I should definitely watch Waking Life in its entirety. I mean, there's that opening scene where the 2 children are playing and one says to the other, "Dream is destiny."
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly, I mean, that whole question of what is reality, what's a dream, what is reality, the blurring of that distinction.
Well, trust me, man. We could go.
Is key.
We could go 5 hours on Waking Life. Like it's such a rich film because you've got. I mean, we just talked about one scene today, and there's at least 10, if not 15 scenes that are equally compelling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, I don't doubt it.
yeah. I mean,
And I mean, we could talk about Linklater for 5 hours as well, but we'll
yeah,
save
we're
for
hitting
another
that. Yeah,
time.
we're hitting the hour mark. So I think maybe that's a good place for
let's
today.
wrap it up.
Cool, Mark. I enjoyed this. Can you remember what we've got next for the 3rd episode? I can't
think
off the top of my head.
I think for episode 3, we'll look at an essay on fascism by Umberto Eco.
Cool. Sounds interesting. All right. Well, thank you. And we'll wrap it up there. Peace
Okay.
from Moscow. Cheers.
Later.
Okay.
Texting.